So I wanted to ask potential candidates who are running for office a few questions, 5 education questions, to figure out what their values are and how they will protect our public education in Ohio, in our local districts, or broadly at the federal level. So, welcome my next guest. My guest today is Laalitya Acharya, and can you tell us a little bit about what you're running for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm running for the Ohio State House in District 56 here in Southwest Ohio. For locals of the area, that's Mason, Lebanon, and Deerfield Township, about 25 minutes north of downtown Cincy. And this is a race that I'm super excited about because we have had some incredible progressive wins over the past couple years in an area that has really been written off as too conservative. And so I absolutely believe that 2026 is our year to flip our state house, really break out of that supermajority, and take back control of the state that has been under single party rule for so long. And I want to make sure that we have fresh perspectives and fresh voices really added to that mix.
Absolutely. We want to represent all voices down here in Southern Ohio, not just some voices. And you're an important part of that process. And for you, obviously, public office can impact public education. But what do you see your future role as in impacting public education?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the proud product of Ohio's public schools. I went to Mason High School, graduated from there. And part of the reason why I'm able to do what I do right now is because I had access to good public education from such a young age. And what we really look at when we think about Ohio's public education structure is that the state is not paying their fair share. Like it is as simple as that. And that's why you're seeing property taxes increase. One of the bordering school districts that's also in my legislative district is Kings. And so they have had to do an income tax to basically do funding for school education now. And so this is a really interesting opportunity that we have to break out of this bad funding situation that we're in and really make sure that people have access to the school education funds that they need. So my opponent is very pro school voucher, which is another thing that's causing a lot of these issues to happen. So school vouchers basically take money out from public schools and send it directly into the black box of non-public education. That could be charter schools, private schools, whatever else. And the interesting fun fact that's not so fun is that the amount of money that a private school gets per student on a voucher is more than a public school gets for their public education students. And so what we're seeing a state that is willing to build a Brown Stadium up north rather than actually provide funding to public schools. They're not willing to pay their fair share, and they're actively defunding public education. And we need somebody who is going to protect all of those things and not only just be on that defensive kind of thing, but also be on the offensive. Be somebody who's willing to be pro universal pre-K because the stats show how important that is to future kids' success for their high school and college graduation rates. Have somebody who's willing to do things like provide meals for our children, our most innocent in schools, and really try and push forward public education rather than just limit it to what it can or can't be.
Yeah, sounds like an overall realignment of priorities
Mhm.
is very much needed. And you've mentioned a couple problems and challenges we're facing in public education right now. What do you think are some of the biggest problems or challenges, if there's one that you haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just money. Everything comes down to funding. And our state legislature controls billions of dollars in funding, and they just choose their priorities. And their priorities right now are not focused on Ohioan families. They are focused on literally anything and everything else besides actually fixing our schools and our roads and our infrastructure and anything else that might be useful. So that's the first one that comes to mind. The second is just providing the support to our educators and our students. So over the past decade, we've seen that the teacher to student ratio in Ohio keeps going up, which is not a good thing. It means that for every single teacher, there are more and more students. Teachers are feeling that burden and that pressure. And especially when we look at a post-pandemic world, we have students that didn't have any education really for a couple of years now in the public school system. And we need to make sure that those kids actually get the support that they need. And when you have teachers who are stretched so thin, they're not able to get that done. The other thing is that as soon as funding gets cut, a lot of the specialty services that a lot of these schools are able to offer, like for neurodivergent students, maybe ESL services, whatever it might be, those get cut first. And so then you're not serving the entire population of kids who go to public school, and you're making it harder for a lot of these kids to be able to learn how to function in everyday life.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of school districts right now are making those hard choices about what's going to get cut
Mhm.
this year because of this funding crisis that's been created. And what is your solution to these challenges? And how would the public office you're running for be able to solve those problems?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've hinted at this a lot, but the state legislature, I think, really gets like pushed under the rug. And our state legislature goes out of their way to be very secretive. So, like, Congress is always in the news, city council, that local level, like, that is directly affecting you, right? Because they have meetings and they're fixing your roads and doing all that incredible stuff. State legislature is kind of in the middle. And what they really do in a lot of ways is they control the money. This is not as education related, but if you look at like Medicaid, Medicare programs, those are basically amounts of money that are given in lump sums to the state legislature. And then the state can do whatever they want with it. They can distribute it however they see fit. And so our state legislature is taking a lot of the funding that they have and just putting it in other places. So first big solution is we have to end school vouchers, especially in areas that have access to good public schools. The stats show that usually vouchers are going to people who are already sending their kids to private school. So you're just
Hmm.
subsidizing people who already have the funding to do that. And I believe in a parent's choice to be able to send their kids wherever they want, but that can't come at the expense of taxpayer dollars, right? Taxpayer dollars go towards serving the public good. And I think one, incremental step that we can make right now is if a private school is going to be getting public money, then they have to be held accountable to the same standards that so many public schools are. They have to be transparent about where their money's coming from, where salaries are going, and all these different things that public schools have to publicly declare, but private schools don't. So they kind of get to have the benefit on both sides. And so I really believe that you need to pick a lane. Um, a second big thing is redistributing how our wealth is really distributed. So when we think about, we have all these unclaimed funds in the Ohio State Legislature where they're spending it on a lot of unique things. I keep mentioning the Brown Stadium because that's the most bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Uh, we're basically subsidizing billionaires to build a new stadium rather than doing things that would fix, like we could put that money towards fixing our roads or fixing our public schools or filling in the gaps on all these other issues that people have, helping hospitals, especially with Medicaid, Medicare cuts, especially in the rural areas of Ohio. And instead, that money isn't being sent where it needs to be. And the third and most important thing to me is we just have to take a really close look at bringing teachers and students into the fold. Like we are not just making policy on top of them, we need to be making policy with them. And I think kind of putting like a blanket declaration of how everything works out is not ever going to be effective because every single school has different needs, different abilities, and we are fortunate enough here in Southwest Ohio to have incredible schools, but that takes money, that takes effort. It takes making sure that our teachers get the support that they need, making sure that students have access to the services that they need. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to keep pushing forward. And that's why it's so important to have a diversity of opinions in our state legislature. And obviously, I have my biases with the political party that I'm coming from, but I think any single party rule of a state is never good because what it means is that they can just override and veto and do whatever they want to do, and they aren't held as accountable to the people. And that's why we have to break out of the supermajority to get that debate, to get that discussion, to have that active engagement with everybody and for everybody.
Absolutely. And we see that with bills that go to Governor DeWine and even get rejected by him and sent back to our current legislature. So we can see how that's been playing out. And so there's always these big reforms that we could try to do once we get into office. But what are some small legislative or policy changes that you would be interested in doing that would have a big impact on our schools?
Yeah, I think transparency is a pretty easy one, right? Like the numbers are already there for our private schools. They know the funding they get, they know how many students use vouchers. All of that just has to be more public. And I think that is a pretty easy thing to implement very quickly. Um, a second thing is that I think blanket school vouchers cannot happen. They're trying to get them implemented. They've been implemented in some places. And a blanket school voucher basically means that regardless of your income, you get the same amount of money. So somebody who is a billionaire would get the same amount on the school voucher as somebody who is making minimum wage. And obviously that can't function. And I think that's, again, a very simple thing that we can hopefully implement quickly. And the third is kind of just putting more restrictions on standardized testing. I've been lucky enough to meet with so many teachers and superintendents and school staff. And what they've said time and time again is that standardized testing makes it so that Yes, we get results. Yes, we get data. And I'm a scientist, so I absolutely appreciate and understand data. But then people are so hyper focused on that standardized testing that we're not actually supporting our kids. We're not making sure that they're learning everything they need to learn for success. It's more so, on the exam, there's 30% fractions. So you have to understand fractions perfectly, but it's okay if you don't understand decimals because decimals make up less than 5%. Like, no, we need to make sure that our
Mm-hmm.
students are getting a holistic understanding of whatever it is. And I understand the need for having that regulation, but I think there has to be a better way. And this would be a little bit of a longer term thing, but really having that conversation with teachers of how can we get numbers in a way that's meaningful to us, but also prioritizes the actual education and learning of our students.
Absolutely. And I see that as a school psychologist of, are we trying to push our students towards a test? Getting rid of the third grade reading guarantee was a big
Mhm.
plus for that, taking off that pressure, but we still have that focus. And then finally, what do you want your constituents to know about your public education positions?
I believe in public education. I think that is just something that is so important. And I think with everything else that can get so diluted, public schools are the backbone of so many communities here in Ohio and across this country. And we need to protect them. We need to make sure that kids have access to the education that they need. It really is that simple. It is our best tool for long-term success. It is our best tool for getting families out of poverty. It is the best thing that we possibly can do for our children. And it's a system that we have in place. And it's a system that has worked incredibly well. We just need to support it, get them the funding that they need, and really keep making it even better and even stronger.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for answering my 5 education questions and best of luck on your run.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.